This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Voting concludes in Hong Kong in first contests under new electoral rules. Guinea's junta rules out exile for ousted President Alpha Condé. And France and the US are to discuss a diplomatic crisis of a phone call in the coming days. Hello and welcome to Africa Live. I am Peninah Karibe. Also coming up tonight, Egypt's capital, Cairo, joins the world in cleanup campaign to save centuries-old buildings. In sports, Kenyan club Tusker books a date with destiny against Zamalek in the CAF Champions League. Guinea's school leaders are not concerned about new sanctions imposed by the West African bloc ECOWAS to pressure a swift transition to constitutional rule. That's according to a junta spokesperson. Junta leader Lieutenant Colonel Mamadi Doumbouya held a press conference on Saturday to address issues raised by ECOWAS. The regional bloc is demanding for the release of deposed leader Alpha Condé. It is also urging for a return to constitutional order in Guinea.
Guineans co-leaders have already held talks with the country's political parties, the religious leaders, the head of Guineans mining companies, the regional coordinations, the banking sector, the civil society, as well as many figures. So the consultation will start. A lot of people here in Guinea have put their trust in Doumbouya, who overthrew President Alpha Condé. Most of Guineans here say that Doumbouya is the right person to put Guinea back on the right track. It is therefore with a great joy that they learned of the nomination of Doumbouya as the head of the country. It is also important to mention that Guinean people themselves are in favor of a transition of 8 months and not the transition of 6 months as imposed by ECOWAS.
Earlier, we spoke with Wole Ojawale, the Regional Organized Crime Observatory Coordinator for Central Africa at the Institute for Security Studies, about developments in Conakry. Take a listen.
The option for the ECOWAS is very, very clear, and it is to explore every possibility that they can to ensure that democratic transition is embarked upon immediately. And I think the first thing which the president of Nigeria has actually spoken about is the fact that there might be the need to activate the Article 45 protocol of ECOWAS on democratic governance. And that implies that not recognizing the election that brought Alpha Condé in with the legitimacy crisis that trade it, and conduct and support the democratic institution within the country, working with AU, UN, to ensure that there is prompt election that takes place in the country. And the starting point is probably to put up a transition government in place that is going to spearhead that within the next 6 months. You know that France has been very, very strong in terms of political leaning of Francophone African countries. So it gets everybody worrisome, like you have said. And I think probably France is just trying to read the situation and intervene as appropriate. But I'm very, very optimistic that France is going to support a democratic process within the country. And then I think the ECOWAS should play the lead role here and not really be too concerned about what role France is going to play on the long run, because this is our own continent and this is our own region. And the primary responsibility for democratic restoration and sustenance actually lies with ECOWAS. So I think we should worry less about the position of France in this and just concentrate on how ECOWAS is going to provide the lead. Ouattara has gone there, the president of Ghana has gone there, and I think going by what has happened in Mali and the role that ECOWAS is playing, we're also going to get a positive response from Guinea in this regard.
In Hong Kong, elections have been held for the election committee that will choose the city's next chief executive. 364 seats are up for grabs with over 400 candidates competing. The Election Administration Commission says they've received 5 complaints regarding voting arrangements as well as qualifications. It was the first ballot since changes were made to Hong Kong's electoral system early this year. Those changes include a requirement that candidates be patriotic. In addition to selecting the chief executive, the election committee will also choose 40 of the 90 lawmakers in the Legislative Council. We're keeping a keen eye on the results and will bring you the latest as soon as they become available. Let's now take a look at what the Hong Kong Election Committee is and what it means for Hong Kong.
More than a year has passed since the Hong Kong National Security Law was enacted, bringing an end to a year of protests and riots. This month, the task at hand is voting for the city's election committee. It's the first public election since Beijing enacted a law modifying the city's electoral system. That law brought a number of key changes. The election committee now has 1,500 members, up from 1,200. It now has a new sector made up of Hong Kong delegates to China's legislature and other national organizations.
That means the election committee will reflect more the views of the people in the grassroots, the labor sector, and in traditional patriotic societies, as well as the small and medium enterprises.
How does this election work? Some of the 1,500 seats of the election committee are selected without election. 325 are ex officio, meaning they are chosen because they are members of Hong Kong's Legislative Council and national organizations. And 156 are nominated by their subsectors. This time, 1,015 candidates run for seats across 36 subsectors. However, close to 60% of these candidates will be returned uncontested, because the number of validly nominated candidates in their subsectors does not exceed the number of members that need to be elected. On Sunday, more than 400 candidates compete for 364 remaining seats. All candidates have to go through a strict vetting process. Those who are deemed to have engaged in acts that violated the basic law or endangered national security would be disqualified. Some subsectors, such as social welfare and education, have seen their number of seats halved.
Naturally, some sectors have to shrink in order to make room for other newly included sectors.
All members of the election committee must be considered to be patriots. The committee will have more power than before. As well as selecting Hong Kong's chief executive, it will also choose 40 members, or over 40% of the Legislative Council. Also, anyone who wishes to run for the Legislative Council this December will need to secure at least 2 nominations from each of the 5 sectors in the election committee. This reform aims to give the chief executive and the legislature a more unified political base.
That will facilitate the cooperation between the legislature and the government.
Supporters of the reform say that bitter divisiveness in Hong Kong politics has hindered the city's ability to tackle deep-rooted social livelihood problems for years.
Particularly when the opposition forces used the legislature as a power base to challenge the authority of the government. Whenever the government tried to tackle with these social issues or economic issues, the government will face a lot of obstruction, resistance. They use different means such as filibusters and even sometimes physical violence to prohibit those social or economic issues from being raised or discussed in the legislature.
Several elections are now in the pipeline, leading up to the election of the chief executive in 2022. The outcome of election reforms in Hong Kong, Lau said, is not to dampen meaningful policy discourse as critics would suggest, but to create a government that gets things done. Yang Shengxi, CGTN, Hong Kong.
The leaders of France and the US are set to discuss a diplomatic crisis over a phone call in the coming days. The countries got in as part of Australia cancelling a submarine contract with Paris. France on Friday recalled its ambassadors from Washington and Canberra following a security deal that also involves Britain. The move sank the multi-billion-dollar order for French submarines. Paris says it will be seeking clarification over the matter. Ross Cullen has more.
evening to French television, saying there has been duplicity, lying, contempt, a breach of trust. There is now a very serious crisis between us, between France and the United States and Australia, and to a lesser extent, the United Kingdom. There could perhaps be a chance for some resolution at presidential level. We do expect Emmanuel Macron and Joe Biden to meet in the coming days. We can hear now from a former French ambassador to the United States.
You have to understand that what was at stake for France was much more than a contract, because providing 12 submarines to Australia was for us a strategic choice. We wanted to build a strategic partnership, which would be the pillar of our Indo-Pacific strategy. And also, I think the Americans and the Australians have had injuries, insults to the injury, because suddenly we discovered they've been plotting in our back for weeks and months. We are allies, you know, it's not the way of treating allies.
You're watching Africa Live. Let's take a short break. Coming up. South Africa's Electoral Commission starts poll registrations for local elections in November.
You're watching breaking news on CGTN.
Welcome to the world today on CGTN.
China has expressed condolences to Algeria over the death of former President Abdelaziz Bouteflika. Bouteflika was a leading politician in Algeria for decades and served as president from 1999 until 2019. He died on Friday at the age of 84. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Zhao Lijian said the former president was an old friend of the Chinese people. Throughout his career, Bouteflika promoted the development of relations with China. South Africa's local election season is in full swing. The country's Electoral Commission, the IEC, is this weekend embarking on election registration. This is meant to encourage all eligible voters to check, update and verify their status on the voters' roll. South Africa is going to the polls for the local elections on November 1st. CGTN's Ulysses Jamila has more.
Electioneering is in full swing as politicians campaign for the upcoming elections. Political parties have unleashed their big guns to ensure that their supporters register to vote. The governing African National Congress had all their top leaders out in Soweto. Soweto is one of South Africa's largest townships.
I'm a councillor.
Here, the leadership, which included the ANC President Cyril Ramaphosa, were confronted by disgruntled residents. Electricity is one of the major issues affecting communities here. Some residents have been experiencing serious electricity problems compounded by cable theft and substations that have been blown up for about 2 years.
The issue of electricity, more than any other issue, has been the overriding problem that our people are complaining about, and in many ways they feel aggrieved in the way that electricity was cut off, in some cases for quite a long time, which is a real concern. They have expressed their anger through various protests, and I felt, together with the Premier and our Executive Mayor and our other NEC members, that we should actually go out there and meet our people and confront the problem head on, rather than run away and rely on a remote way of dealing with the problem.
Currently, Soweto owes the National Electricity Power Utility ESCOM over 7 billion rand in unpaid bills, making it difficult for the power utility to improve its electricity distribution in this township.
On the whole, the matter of electricity was, I think, well dealt with. And of course, we dealt with it in the end by saying that we're going to ensure that ESCOM does restore electricity.
The ANC president is spending this weekend crisscrossing many areas in Soweto, engaging residents on different matters affecting them. Opposition parties are also out in full force trying to ensure that their supporters register to vote. In the meantime, eligible voters have begun trickling in at various registration sites across the country. Yulisa Njameda for CGTN in Soweto, South Africa.
Staying in South Africa, September is Tourism and Heritage Month, and to celebrate the global theme of tourism for inclusive growth, Cape Town is determined to showcase some of the hidden gems in its township communities. Renee Delcam went on a tour of Langa, one of the oldest townships in South Africa.
Langa is situated around 15 kilometers from the Cape Town city centre and was a popular tourist attraction for international visitors before the COVID-19 pandemic. The township was established back in 1927 and has produced plenty of sporting and musical talent. Langa boasts a wide variety of arts and cultural activities and has its own unique flavors of African food and wine.
Langa is very rich in culture. We've been around. Langa is the first township in Cape Town, and our heritage is very rich. And our wine, Latita wines, means the name itself. It means Latita. That means the rising of the sun. Latita is a proudly Langa township brand.
Before COVID-19, the Namase guest house used to be booked out with international tourists who enjoyed the authentic experience of living in a township home. Now, most of the guests just come for the weekend.
Although it's small, but it's very comfortable. When people come here, they feel safe. And I say, look, this is meant to be a second home away from home. And that's the feeling apparently they get, because that's the feedback afterwards I usually get.
Like the tourism industry around the world, Cape Town tourism is hoping to recover from an uncertain and turbulent time in the past 18 months. For them, tourism is not just about attracting visitors, but about improving the lives of everyone in the city.
We've had a very tough 18 months. We've had to go back to basics. We've had to innovate exactly the way that we showcase Cape Town. We've done a lot of work in our communities leading up to COVID. And since COVID, we have been focusing a lot on trying to help the industry recover. We're doing a lot of work with product to try and get them ready for when internationals are going to come back to our shores. And today was just about celebrating that.
Cape Town tourism is looking forward to welcoming international visitors back to the city and its townships over the festive season. Renee Delcam, CGTN, Langa, in South Africa's Western Cape province.
The Egyptian capital is leading a major cleanup program in slum areas to save its centuries-old buildings. Decades of poor maintenance has put antiquities at risk in southern Cairo, an area rich with Islamic architecture. Cairo is restoring these monuments and reviving them as new tourist attractions. Here's Adel Mahri with more.
Residents in the Egyptian capital produce more than 19 tons of waste daily. Picking up this waste and recycling it has for decades been a major challenge to the authorities. Lately, Cairo realized that this phenomenon is putting its ancient architecture at major risks.
South of Cairo has a lot of historic sites and a huge waste collection management problem. The Al Fostat area was the center of our modern history. Most of the waste there was construction leftovers, which is heavy. It's been accumulated for many years to the extent that it began affecting the structure of the ancient wall there.
This wall is the Cairo Citadel Aqueduct. Initially built in the late 12th century, its job was to carry the Nile water for more than 3 kilometers to the citadel where the Islamic Ayyubite dynasty ruled Egypt. Cairo's Cleaning and Beautification Authority is leading the cleanup around the wall. 36 vehicles have been clearing 48,000 cubic meters of rubbish daily to complete the task in just 1 week.
The target is to preserve our national heritage. That makes dealing with the waste a delicate matter. We have loaders and rails. We had to carefully remove the waste and make a buffer of clear area around the wall. It required well-trained drivers. One mistake could see our rich history vanish. The authority will not leave any historic site unattended. We are working in the 18th century's graveyards. We created a hotline so that residents can report any cleanliness violations.
The 800-year-old Citadel Aqueduct is going to be the centerpiece for a new tourism project that aims to revive southern Cairo's ancient attractions. The government demolished 90 acres of slum areas behind the wall for this project, which will be mimicking cities built during the Islamic Empire. Known for its leather tanning workshops, all residents and small businesses here at Al Fustat have been relocated to new neighborhoods on the eastern outskirts of Cairo.
In this area, Egypt will revive the ancient waterfall that used to lift the Nile water over the wall so it would flow all the way to the citadel. This part that I'm standing in will be turned into a national park that will be served with a market, cultural centers and a theater, all designed in a way to take visitors back to Egypt's 12th century. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
This is Africa Live. Coming up in sports, Kenyan club Tusker books a date with Destiny against Zamalek in the CAF Champions League.